Шығармаларды талдап, ондағы
Dissecting a number of literary works and analyzing the unique meanings hidden in them, I noticed one interesting thing.
байқадым. Көлемді
It is more difficult to analyze short stories and essays rather than voluminous novels and long poems.
талдау қиын екен. Мысалы,
For most readers, the volume of the book matters, and if the essay is short, they might read it in one sitting.
тура қазір оқып шығуға дайын.
But in fact, a book's volume doesn't matter at all, as there are works that, despite being small, carry a huge meaning.
Мысалы, Magzhan Zhumabayev
Magzhan Zhumabayev's poems, Qazaq and Koilybay's Kobyz, are great proof of this.
менің айтқаныма
These two poems won't take much of your time. Try reading them and see for yourself.
алмайды. Оқып көріңізші.
Aynur Toleo, poet and a literary critic, Master of Humanities and Literature Studies, laureate of the Beimbet Mylan Special Prize, winner of the Republican Poetry Competition dedicated to the 175th birth anniversary of Abai.
Том кітап оқып, бірақ
You can reread many books and still never find what you were looking for.
бір ғана
And sometimes it happens that one can find a great inspiration in a single line.
поэзия
In this sense, poetry is considered a great achievement of the human mind.
ерекше идеялар мен
Global ideas and historical events, love and hate, dreams and regrets, all this can be told in verses.
болады. Нағыз ақындар мен хас талант.
Truly talented poets can express any thought in one verse. Sometimes these thoughts can result in a longer poem.
Мәселе туындының көлемі.
In fact, it's never about the length of the writing.
Оқырманын
It is always about whether the author succeeded in enticing a reader with his reflections,
сұрақтардың арасына
and whether the reader can ask questions and find answers to these questions between the lines.
жауап тапса, жабырқаған жанын
And if the poet has managed to heal the reader's emotional grief with his words, then this is a huge victory.
үлкен олжа болмақ. Magzhanды оқыған
Each time reading Magzhan, I'm convinced of this again and again. I think that any book lover, when first reading Zhumabayev, will change his poetic tastes and standards once and for all.
өзгеріп шыға келеді.
Magzhan Zhumabayev was a poet and a prominent figure in the Alash movement. He was born on June 25, 1893 on the shore of Lake Sasakol in the Bulayev district, North Kazakhstan region. Now this area bears the name of Magzhan Zhumabayev. At the age of 4, he learned to read and write. From 1923 to 1927, Magzhan studied at the Higher Literary and Art Institute in Moscow, where he had the opportunity to study Russian and Western European literature. There he met with cultural figures of Russia and maintained friendly relations with many of them. In 1938, he was falsely accused and arrested. On March 19th of the same year, he was sentenced to be shot.
Ахмет Байтұрсынұлы Абайды қазақтың
Ahmed Baitursunov called Abai the main Kazakh poet. Today's writers consider Magzhan Zhumabayev to be the second great artist of words after Abai.
деп есептейді. Magzhan әдеби
This poet came to Kazakh literature when great changes and transformations were taking place in the everyday life of Kazakhs.
болып жатыр еді. Айталық
Such a big transformation was, for instance, the process of transition of Kazakhs from a nomadic lifestyle to sedentary one.
үлкен өзгеріс болып жатыр.
In those difficult and critical years, it was only natural that such a poet like Magzhan appeared.
Заңдылық еді.
His poetry was beautiful, he was a master of metaphorical thought, and he was indeed an extraordinary phenomenon not only in Kazakh literature, but in the entire Turkic world.
Құбылыс еді. Сондықтан
His poem Turkestan, for example, became the anthem of all Turkic peoples,
ұранына айналды. Ал қойлы
and his poems, Koilybay's Kobyz and Qazaq, are the heritage of the entire Turkic world.
ортақ мұрасындай.
In the Koilybay's Kobyz poem, the main object is Kobyz. A sacred instrument is associated with magic, whereas baxı are the people who can communicate with two worlds. This was the main author's idea, to display in his poem the trepidation and respect that Kazakhs had for Kobyz and baxı. Kobyz is an instrument of unique shape, amazing sounding, with a timbre rich in overtones. According to legend, Korkut, a mystical, literary, and historical character, invented this instrument. Kobyz can emit the sound of a human voice, the howl of a wolf, the scream of the swan, and the sounds of wind and water. These days in modern Kazakhstan, it is a common phenomena to play the Kobyz.
Ал енді поэмаға қайта оралайық. ат шапса, арқасы қозатын
Now let's get back to the poem.
тұлпармен бірге
The Kazakhs, watching the races with special passion, suddenly decided to send Koilybai's Kobyz to the race.
Аттары бәйгесіне қосады.
Why does a musical instrument suddenly take part in the races, and what is the meaning of this literary approach?
Заңды сұрақ туындайды. Сәйгүлік
There is an expression, a horse is a horseman's wings.
өскен қазақтар үшін
For Kazakhs, any speed was measured by the speed of a horse.
жылдамдығымен өлшенеді.
Now imagine what can be better than a fast horse in a great step.
Арғымақтан
Nothing beats it.
не бар? Ештеңе жоқ. Ал Magzhan
And the poet Magzhan compares the sacred Kobyz with a horse, and this comparison is very convincing.
өте нанымды шығады. Мен Koilybaiдің Kobyzын бәйгеге қосып жатырмын.
From the moment Koilybai decided to take part in the race, I was sure that the main prize would go to him.
Баяғыдан ақ Kobyzда
The Turks have long believed in the magical power of Kobyz.
мифтік шығармаларды
The study of myths in Kazakh literature begins with oral folklore.
сондағы мол мұраны
It is this rich heritage that the symbolist poet Magzhan Zhumabayev was able to present in a new light with a special poetic twist.
Magzhan Zhumabayev. Бала жастан
Baxı Koilybai has been friends with genies since childhood, and he is always accompanied by the one-eyed demon Kakaman, the spirit Nadir, and the obstinate demon Shailan.
шайтан жүреді.
He once finds himself at a funeral feast where different people gather for a grand event.
Екі
The tears were fighting, the horses were rushing, competing with each other.
қызық көріп
And then the people longing for entertainment asked Koilybai to take part in the races with his Kobyz.
салады. Koilybaiдің Kobyzы поэмасы арқылы ақын өнер
In his Koilybai's Kobyz poem, the poet glorifies folk art.
өнер озып кетті.
In whatever race art participates, it will always be ahead.
Ойына жинақтаған
Because this is a sacred concept that has absorbed the worldview of the Kazakhs.
өз үнінде сөзбен
The
айтып
sound of Kobyz contains dreams that cannot be expressed in words.
музыкада тіл
Music has no language, but everyone understands it.
бәріне ортақ мұра.
Therefore, this is the common heritage of all mankind.
Тыңдап көріңізші, онда осынау
Try to listen to Q performed on Kobyz. It will tell you the story of the people who lived in this endless steppe.
түркі әлемі бір
In
тұтас
its sounds, every Turk can hear motives dear to his soul.
сөзсіз мойындар.
Therefore, Baxı Koilybai is a great phenomena in this poem.
Жақсы
He's a character who knows how to communicate with the other world.
байланысқа түсе алатын кейіпкер. Асқа жиылған аң
At the request of the Batirs and important rich people who gathered for a memorial feast, the Baxı decides to participate in the races with his Kobyz.
қандай
What else can the Baxı be proud of, if not his Kobyz?
аламанға асып
He did not prepare the horse for the race like other rich men, but before the Baxı, the gates of both worlds are open. His Kobyz was recognized by the genie world.
енді
The time has come to show the world the power of the sacred instrument.
қасым көрек. Осылай
So he ordered to tie the Kobyz to the suxel growing in the place where the races were held. In Kazakh literature, there is a concept called the game of Baxı. This is the moment when a Baxı goes into trance. This scene, described by Magzhan, is especially impressive.
беруі ерекше әсерлі. Сол уақыт жай отырған Koilybайды әруақ қалшыл
Suddenly the spirit entered Koilybai, who was sitting peacefully. He trembled in an instant.
жап жалаңаш қылыш
And bloody foam then ran out of my mouth. He turned his sword into a Kobyz. His eyes were bloodshot. The earth buzzed with sounds.
мезгіл екпіндетіп долда
Howling, raging in anger, they died down, muttering softly.
қалың құмды қап қара
Then the whirlwind rose, black clouds mixed with dust,
бүлдетті жан жақты ың-жың у
buzzing around and rustling. Demons clattered their hooves, and the shaman played all the time, moaning.
ойнап сарнап бақ
And all sweaty, exhausted, he fell down.
қап қара көрге басты. Біз бақсы ойынын көріп
We've never seen Baxı rituals. Today we can only read about this phenomenon of our culture in fiction and non-fiction literature.
деректі дүниелерден ғана оқып біле аламыз.
Over time, everything will be erased from our consciousness.
Біздің санамыздан өшіп
Magzhan was much closer to that nomadic Kazakh lifestyle.
көшпелі қазақ өміріне жақын ғұмыр кешті. Сондықтан
That's why he managed to convey the sound of Baxı's Kobyz so vividly.
Magzhanның бұл
This work of Magzhan is a poetic monument to Kobyz and Baxı.
өлеңмен қойылған ескерткіш.
Of course, among Kazakh writers, I love Abay, all that I consumed, what I was saturated with from childhood. It has always been Abay. I also love Magzhan. I love his Europeanness and his brilliant talent. Among all the writers and poets of the present time, only Magzhan's words can reach the future and remain in history. I think the words of the rest of us are dubious and not credible. Mukhtar Awezov, writer. Scientists believe that the Kazakh national dance was based on the ritual movements of baxı. As we already learned before, the main instrument of the shaman was Kobyz. The strings for this instrument were made from horsehair. Is there a connection between this animal and Kobyz? Those who will read Koilybay's Kobyz should pay attention to this. The path of baxı, the keeper of the sacred instrument, the heritage of Kobyz has never been simple. To perform Tengren rituals, one needs to know the canons of this belief well, and in order to understand Magzhan, the reader needs to know the philosophy of Tengrenism. Do not grieve, poor blind man. I am the son of the sun, in my eyes is the sunshine. I proudly carry the sacred crown, prophet born from the son of the Huns. In the prophet poem, the poet describes the ancient beliefs of the Turkic people associated with the sun. Magzhan was a symbolist, and this was quite natural. Every spring, every dry tree in the great steppe in which he was born and raised had a special meaning for him. He described the entire Tengren culture in the poem Koilybay's Kobyz. Magzhan is wonderful in his lyricism, artistic quality of his works, free flow of words, and ingenuity. The delicate and gentle sound of his words is as beautiful as a string of pearls and the shine of silk, and at the same time, it is full of sadness. Jibek writer. Magzhan was a poet true to his position and ideas, just like his character Bayan from the Batır Bayan poem. Elias at that time, such a person was a menace to the political system. The Alash activist Magzhan dreamed of the unity of the entire Turkic world. His main dream was the freedom of the Turanian steppe. Magzhan was obstinate, just like a frisky horse from the poem about Koilybai. In this poem, one can hear the sad voice of the era. The poet wrote with regret the following lines. Now, if we could only continue the work of Korkut, washing my soul with tears. Having lived in an immortal world, crying and howling, I would go to the grave, embracing Kobyz. In his works, we see the image of a free Turkic people, faithful to heaven and earth, space and the universe. Famous writers, close friends of Magzhan, noted this feature of his personality. For example, the famous poet Mikhail Svetlov, who studied together with Zhumabayev, remembered him in the following words. I knew your great poet, Magzhan Zhumabayev. The most eminent and obstinate writers of Moscow made way for him. The famous writer Osip Mandelstam gave the same high assessment to the poet. He considered Magzhan not a man but a centaur, a Pegasus of the Kazakh steppe. The fates of these two poets who were close as brothers are similar. Both Mandelstam and Zhumabayev's poems were forbidden to read in Soviet time. In that era, a freedom-loving person was persona non grata. He was only allowed to glorify the image of the Soviet man. There were not so many people who would dare to write about non-traditional representatives of the people, such as baxı Korkut and baxı Koilybai. The national mentality, especially the nomadic worldview, is the basis of the Turkic people, and a single Soviet ideology could be created only by abolishing these ideas. Magzhan revived from the ashes with his pen, nurturing what was almost forgotten. He perfectly knew both Western and Eastern literature and was able to raise Kazakh poetry to a new level. He created invaluable works that have become the common heritage of all Turkic peoples.
құнды еңбектер қалдырды.